Hi, I'm Lindsey, and I'm talking with MedTech industry leaders on how they change lives for a better world.
The inventions and technologies are fascinating, and so are the people who work with them.
There was a period of time where I realized fundamentally my job was to go hang out with really smart people that are saving lives and then do work that would help them save more lives.
I got into the business to save lives, and it is incredibly motivating to work with people who are in that same business, saving or improving lives.
What better industry than where I get to wake up every day and just save people's lives?
These are extraordinary people doing extraordinary work, and this is The Leading Difference. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Leading Difference podcast. I'm your host, Lindsey, and I am so looking forward to my conversation today with Ryan Phelan. Ryan is a partner and patent attorney at the Chicago-based intellectual property law firm, Marshall Gerstein, where he counsels medtech companies on protecting their valuable IP. Ryan ultimately believes that AI is an important technology to embrace, but cautions medical device and related companies to approach it pragmatically, developing a policy to govern and protect intangible assets and innovation. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, Ryan. I'm so excited to speak with you today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you, Lindsey.
Of course. Well, I'd love if you'd start off by sharing a little bit about your background and what led you to MedTech.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm an attorney by trade, and I started off in probably a different place than most people in medtech, but I have a computer science degree, and I worked in industry first for Accenture, doing a lot of programming and consulting in the fintech world. So high frequency trading and programming some pretty complicated data and algorithms in order to trade stocks and bonds and securities, things like this. That let me see aspects of intellectual property that people were doing with respect to the code I was writing. So I'm curious with IP and law, and that led me to law school at Northwestern Law and pursuing a joint JD MBA program that I finished in 2010. And I went into IP law with a passion for technology, pretty much in the computing space. And then in the last decade or so, IP practitioners, not unlike doctors, like to practice in specific areas. And one of the ones that I focused on is software, medical devices. And so that kind of led me into the realm of medtech.
Very nice. Okay. So you have had such an interesting career trajectory. And I'm wondering, back in the day, say, 6-year-old Ryan, could 6-year-old Ryan have predicted that you would be a lawyer and particularly intellectual property?
Absolutely not. I mean, first of all, nobody in my family, at least immediate family, was a lawyer. And so going to law school was not on the radar. I grew up in Louisiana in a small town, basically farm-like. So certainly technology and stuff like that wasn't available in the city. But I did have a passion for things ever tech. I was certainly a kid that loved to take things apart, put them back together and build all kinds of Legos and stuff like that. So that basic kind of STEM acumen or desire was always there from the beginning. And so as I grew up and got exposed to more things, certainly in college, it became kind of a passion. And so I ended up doing that. We did have some medical issues in my family, including cardiac and cancer and stuff like that. So those types of things always hit home with me. And you're getting to a chance to kind of lean into medtech, at least on the software side, with medtech devices that include or incorporate medical technology became very interesting to me personally.
Yeah, of course. And so going back just a smidgen, when you decided to go into law and, you've come from this background that was the software engineering and you've got this fintech background and you have all of these amazing skill sets already, what led you specifically to say, okay, I want to focus on intellectual property. And so this is going to be my sweet spot.
Yeah. So when you go to law school, you get exposed to a lot of different classes. In fact, in the first year of law school, you're required to take a bunch of baseline courses like criminal law and all these things. And so you quickly figure out what you like and what you don't like. And so for me, the computer science degree is always kind of the heart of what I loved. And so I tended to like classes that were up that alley, so to speak. And the IP course that I took was definitely there because it was all about technology, inventions, people making things, and how those inventions played out in court. So I found my greatest joy and wonderful to be in those classes. So I spoke up the most in class, and the best is kind of saying that you should do things that you love because you never have to work a day in your life kind of thing. So I always try to think about that, and certainly fun today because I practice in IP and pick that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in addition to all of the other credentials you have, you are also a published author and you are a speaker. And I would love if you would share maybe a little bit more about how you got into being a thought leader as well in your industry and how that path has taken you.
Yeah, for sure. It's the same kind of thing. I've always liked to write as well. And
Yeah.
I feel that when I write about something, I really get to understand it. And so in my field, there's a lot of stuff happening all the time, like a court would come out with a new case on IP and a MedTech or AI or something like this. And I really like to dig into it to figure out how can I use this court decision as like a tool for clients, or how does this change things up? What will clients ask me questions going forward? Or how can this be an interesting topic to either write about or to speak about? And so I try to learn when I'm reading, and then I write it, and that teaches me. And I think and hope that others get a benefit from that too. I publish. So
Yes, of course. Of course. And you are also, if I'm not mistaken, an adjunct professor. So, first of all, do you sleep? And second of all, tell me more about this as well, please.
yeah, so I'm an adjunct professor at Northwestern Law. I teach a course on patenting software inventions. I do sleep because it's only once a year for
Okay.
a power week. I think it's like 3 days out of the year. They're long classes. They're like a few hours each, but we pack in several 30-minute course sessions into a day. So one day, maybe we'll go for 3 hours or 2 hours, and, we'll get the benefit of several weeks of coursework by doing all of that at once in those 3 days. And so I teach on that. We teach fundamentals of patenting software inventions, which includes MedTech software devices. For example, that classifies software medical inventions in certain, ways, like there's software as a medical device where you have the software only, such as you have database with medical data and you're either formatting it or storing it or processing it in some unique way, or you have software in a medical device where you actually have a physical device. It's like a cardiac device where the software is running or at least partially running that device. So we talk about ways to patent those inventions, primarily with US law. So,
Very nice. So, specifically thinking about your medtech clients, because I know you probably have clients in many industries, but specifically in medtech, what are some of the common mistakes you see medtech companies making, especially say, an earlier startup or something like that, when maybe they haven't thought through an aspect that really should be thought through a little bit earlier in the process? What are some common things that you see that people should be aware of?
yeah, I mean, easily one of them is not filing a patent application early. And if they are a startup company and they have their biggest selling product or what they think will be their biggest selling product and they don't file a patent application on it, that could be bad because you have 1 year to get to the patent office with that, at least in the US, to file something once it's been publicly disclosed. And if you miss that deadline, then effectively you're allowing your competitors to copy it. If you're a startup company, the last thing you want is for your product to become extremely successful, and then a big Fortune 500 company gets wind of it, figures out you don't have a patent, and then just starts making it themselves and takes away your market share. So that would be, I think that's every inventor or startup's like worst nightmare, right? So getting that patent on file before the deadline is pretty important.
Yeah, of course. No, I noticed you had recently written an article on LinkedIn about when to file this patent. And I know part of maybe some concerns that might arise are, well, we don't necessarily want this to be in public awareness yet. So, how do you walk that line between this is RIP, we're really trying to keep it very tight versus, but I also need this protection, this legal protection. So, how do you navigate things like that?
Yeah. So the point at which you need to make your invention publicly available or to disclose it, because you need to, maybe you're on a pitch competition, you need to show your invention on like a PowerPoint deck in front of, hundreds of people, then that's probably a good point to start thinking about filing a patent application. If you're still developing it and it's like in your basement, so to speak, and nobody's seen it, it's still secret, and you don't need to necessarily file a patent application at that point. Although there's a funny thing in patent law where if you have an idea, sometimes there's somebody else thinking about it too, and the first one that gets the patent office wins. And so we certainly don't want to wait around too long and find out years later that you can file your patent application a day after somebody else. This actually happened with Thomas Edison and the light bulb. We had lots of fights about the other person that was claiming the same thing that lost, and I don't remember his name today because of that. So anyway, so that's one thing to keep in mind when you're starting out.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of those kinds of stories, are there any that particularly stand out to you as you've worked with all of these incredible clients who have seriously life-changing products they're creating? Are there any that really stand out to you in your memory as affirming, oh my goodness, this is why I'm here. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing?
Yeah, for sure. One that stands out is one in the opioid or the narcotics market. In my family, we have an individual who is fortunately affected by this. And so I had a client that reached out to me to create a VR program that helps to eliminate or to reduce cravings in this field. And that one was really impactful because using algae and non-pharmaceutical way in order to reduce cravings for people that are struggling with addiction of some type, I felt to be very important. So I thoroughly enjoy working with that inventor and helping to create that patent application for that invention.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Thank you for sharing about that. I think sometimes those really personal connection kinds of stories are the ones that really stick in your mind because it helps to have this moment of realization like, that what you do matters, of course, but then having that extra layer of confirmation that, yes, this is helping somebody who could literally be a family member or a close friend or relative is really
Yeah,
impactful. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So, considering all of the industries that you currently serve, and of course, you have this incredibly varied background, which can only be wonderful to draw on from this rich history and experience of yours. What are some interesting crossovers you see between industries that can be useful in terms of maybe one industry approaches something in a way that you've seen could actually really benefit folks in medtech or vice versa? Are you seeing trends like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest ones that I can think of now is artificial intelligence coming into play with medtech. I mean, certainly medtech kind of runs the gamut of, like we mentioned before, software only to physical devices that incorporate software. And so AI is interesting because you can load an AI model onto one of these physical devices, or you can have an AI model that's medtech based sitting on a server somewhere that can help doctors look or find particular cause or whatnot like that based on symptoms that a patient may walk into, or maybe there's a device like a needle that has an AI model on it that helps injection or something like this. And so these AI tools are becoming smarter, and I think that they help in the field of medtech, and they require a different level of expertise with these inventions to not only create them because they're complex, but also to bring them to market because they require specific FDA regulations. Even the FDA right now is trying to figure out AI. They have approved several AI devices, but it usually comes down to, is your AI device going to change in the near future because they're going to update the model? And if so, does that change it enough to require like a new submission? So the fact that AI moves so rapidly doesn't really mix well with the FDA's process of approving the device and having it set in stone at that approval state.
Yeah. So, where do you anticipate that this will take medical devices? Do you think it'll become so naturally ingrained in many of them that it's just sort of part of our reality? Or do you think we'll still have those, what do we want to call them, not AI functionality?
Yeah, I think both will exist. Certainly a spectrum of these devices, right? Certainly there's surgical tools that exist now that have hundreds of years or hundred of years, just in different, maybe better forms. So those will stick around. The AI assisted ones, I'm sure will find their niche and live alongside the existing tools.
Yeah, absolutely. If you could narrow it down, what would be maybe your top piece of advice for a medtech startup founder from your perspective in your role?
Yeah, I guess the number one would be again to, make sure you're not giving away the crown jewels, have your patent filed before you step out. If you're trying to raise money, just be careful that you're not sharing information publicly. You have to share with a potential investor, consider an NDA, or if they won't sign an NDA, you can file a provisional patent application with the patent office that shows that you have something on file before you talk to others. And as long as you describe the invention sufficiently in the four corners of your provisional application, then that's often the best way to protect yourself going out. So I think as an IP attorney, that would be the number one advice that I would give a startup company in the medtech space.
That's incredible. Thank you for that. That's really appreciated advice. So it's so interesting because when I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, of course, you have all of this incredible experience. And one thing actually really stood out to me, and that was that at least at some point you have been and I'm sure you've done this throughout your career multiple times, but a pro bono lawyer for lawyers for the creative arts. And I was curious about that and how you got involved. And can you share a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, so LCA, or Lawyers for the Creative Arts, is an organization here in Chicago that deals with artists of limited means. Usually they have some type of base issue that they want handled. It mainly deals with IP. Typically, I work on a different capacity for these because I see them as like kind of fun learning opportunities. I usually work in the copyright space, and the clients that I work with need help either filing a copyright for maybe a piece of art that they've created, or maybe have a question about how their IP is being used or sold in some way, and they need to figure out if their IP has been infringed. And so we'll work with them in a pro bono capacity to help write a letter to a company or to file a copyright registration and things like that.
Well, as a as my side thing, also an artist, I just want to say thank you because it is so great that you're doing things like that for the artist community. It is not always easy. So that's
Yeah.
great. Appreciate
So
it. Yeah. So as you look towards your own future, what are you excited about, say, in the next year or two?
very excited to see how, I guess, AI is playing out with MedTech. You're seeing regulations and guidelines coming out of the United States Patent and Trademark Office and also the Copyright Office about how these laws will impact artists. I've sat on a panel with the Copyright Office and the United States Patent and Trademark Office as they're thinking through these decisions and putting out these guidelines. There is questions about, is the new administration going to change things up with respect to guidance and guidelines that have come out? So, artists are looking at AI as like a tool, like a paintbrush, and the law is kind of looking at it, obviously, from the legal perspective. And it doesn't seem like those two things are aligned yet. There's common in history that the law typically lags the technology by, a decade or two or more. And so that's certainly the case with AI. For example, there is a famous, we would call it case, but a denial of a copyright registration at the Copyright Office for a gentleman that had created an AI piece of art work, won the Colorado State Fair, I think in 2022, and trying to file a copyright registration, but was denied. And he told the Copyright Office basically he had entered in 500 plus prompts in order to generate, or at least partially generate, this work of art, but was still denied, not because of his effort, just because of the way the law is written under current copyright statutes. And so things like that seem to be, at least from a policy perspective, incorrect. And so it'd be great to see exciting how this plays out. Will Congress care enough to change it, or how will artists be impacted under these types of laws and policy considerations going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So, pivoting the conversation a little bit just for fun, imagine that you were to be offered $1 million to teach a masterclass on anything you want. It can be within your industry or part of your amazing background, or it could be about something entirely different. What would you choose to teach?
Yeah, wow. I guess I would teach what I'm currently teaching because I do enjoy the class I teach now. I'm at Northwestern, my alma mater, which I love. It's down the street from the office. It's down same place where I went to school or teach the law and things that I do every day, which is patenting software inventions, including the MedTech space. If I could get $1 million to teach what I do now, that would be wonderful in this hypergrowth. So,
Right. I love it. Excellent. And how do you wish to be remembered after you leave this world?
wow. Hope people remember me as someone who was fun loving and enjoyed tech and hopefully brought some information to the world that helped them in some way.
Yeah, of course. And final question. What is one thing that makes you smile every time you see or think about it?
Oh, wow. I guess there's a lot of stuff. I also like to do some type of sports. Currently, the ski season is ending, so I certainly enjoy skiing. So when I see or think about that's one of those things. And now coming into the golf season, so I transitioning to that. We're looking forward to some good weather here finally in Chicago. It was 80 degrees last week and it snowed yesterday. So things are changing from golf to ski season, but one of those is always fun.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Yeah. If folks who are listening are in a position, would there be a way for them to get in contact with you? And then how early should they do that actually?
Yeah, there's multiple stages. They can get in touch with me anytime they want. You can always find me at our firm's website, Marshall Gerstein. Or yes, you want to, you can go to patentnext.com, just patent and the word next.com. That's my blog that I write on typically, and it has my contact information there, including my email address.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Well, Ryan, it has been a joy to speak with you today. I really appreciate you sharing a little bit about your career and your insights, your advice. Especially appreciate that for MedTech founders who might, not quite know where to start with this whole legal element that they really need to consider. So I really appreciate you sharing kind of when and how to do that.
And we're excited to be making a donation on your behalf as a thank you for your time today to Sleep in Heavenly Peace, which provides beds for children who don't have any in the United States. So thank you for choosing that charity to support. And thank you again so much for being here. This has been a wonderful conversation.
And I just wish you the most continued success as you work to change lives for a better world.
Thank you, Lindsey. My pleasure. Happy to be here too. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And for our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. If you're feeling as inspired as I am, I'd love it if you'd share this episode with a colleague or two, and we'll catch you next time.
The Leading Difference is brought to you by Velentium. Velentium is a full-service CDMO with 100% in-house capability to design, develop, and manufacture medical devices from Class 2 wearables to Class 3 active implantable medical devices. Velentium specializes in active implantables, leads, programmers, and accessories across a wide range of indications, such as neuromodulation, deep brain stimulation, cardiac management, and diabetes management. Velentium's core competencies include electrical, firmware, and mechanical design, mobile apps, embedded cybersecurity, human factors and usability, automated test systems, systems engineering, and contract manufacturing. Velentium works with clients worldwide, from startups seeking funding to established Fortune 100 companies. Visit Velentium.com to explore your next step in medical device development.